So this talk is mainly for Daniel Archer. Uh, I've been thinking a lot about when the discovery was made, where my mind was, how everything came to be, and the very root of the issue was never about planet formation. What had happened is the discovery was an independent phenomenon that then branched to planet formation because that's where it headed. But there's also another branch that I've been neglecting that I've just sort of brushed to the side because it's much more fascinating to try to explain all the objects in the solar system versus how a star is born. And looking at this picture, I'll show you guys here in this little laptop. Looking at this picture on the Wikipedia page, right there. Go ahead and look it up. It's Stellar Evolution is the Wikipedia page. Scroll down about halfway down the page. It says, the onion-like layers of a massive, evolved star just before core collapse. And as you'll see there, it has the iron in the center, silicon, oxygen, neon, carbon, helium, and hydrogen. When I looked at that picture, I immediately realized that that's the Earth. I was like, those are the layers of the Earth. The iron in the center, the silicon crust, the oxygen in the atmosphere, the neon, carbon life forms on top, neon life forms, neon and the carbon life forms, and then the helium and hydrogen, which are, very diffuse and constantly escaping. The root of the discovery was the realization that stars do not explode. That was the root of this discovery. Stars do not explode. And as much as it goes against mainstream interpretation, over all these years that I've been designing this theory and working on it, I really consider the fact that the environment astronomers, astrophysicists, and physicists were working in skewed their mind into believing that stars explode at the end of their lives. It was more or less a environmental push, if you will, from other scientists because of the nuclear age. Everything was fusion. Everything was a big, fantastic explosion. There was all this energy available. There was all this power that needed to be harnessed. And the mentality of these astronomers immediately went to the biggest, brightest things that we see in the night sky. And those are the stars. And even the bigger, brighter things are the supernovas, which, according to the mainstream belief, can outshine entire galaxies for a short period of time. And that's really important to understand because the origination of the term nova was literally, it meant new. When the ancients looked up at the sky and they saw this bright thing, they didn't think that it was an exploding star. That wasn't their mind. That wasn't where their mind was at. They said nova, meaning new. To them, it was a new star in the night sky. But what happened is that somehow throughout history, we sort of lost our way and got overzealous with our ability to harness nuclear reactions and our ability to wipe out entire civilizations with just one bomb. We sort of got ahead of ourselves, in essence. And we looked at all the stars as being these surreal fusion reactors that explode and have all these strange events happening in their interiors that make all the elements in the galaxy and yada, yada, yada. And we just went completely overboard with it back in the 1920s to the 1960s, 70s. And the reality is that we sort of lost our way. We started building up a worldview that just moved further and further and further away from reality. We just sort of kept on going and going and going, and arguing against the specifics about what everybody already believes to be true, the little branches and leaves to the tree, without addressing the root of the issue, I don't think is worth my time. Which is why I don't exactly respond to a lot of the criticism when they don't have the capacity to address the root of the issue. And that's how the discovery was made. It addresses the root of the issue. Stars don't explode at the end of their lives. Stars are extremely stable objects. They are stable for hundreds of millions of years. And the mentality of the 1920s to the 1960s and 70s astronomers and astrophysicists was, oh, well, the nuclear reactions, they power everything. Everything's powered by nuclear this, nuclear that. And it sort of clouded the minds and the judgments and the abilities for these people to reason well, to reason with, to reason, to be rational. And they sort of got caught up in a larger fad, if you will. I think it's a long-term fad, is the belief that stars explode. And this also ties into, and Daniel, this is really important. Of course, you already know this, and I think you're really, really, truly getting it. Concerning the novas, is that the worldview was already set into place with what they defined as being a star versus a planet. So naturally, it made sense for them just to say, well, the stars explode. They can't cool, collapse, and die and lose heat and energy and light and their mass over hundreds of millions of years. Because if they did, they would resemble what we term planets. And another root of the issues is I want people to understand is that it isn't necessarily that I can't do experiments or I can't do big fancy math equations or write papers that have all these references and all this other stuff. All that is just the details. All that is just fluff. It's fluff. It really is. Because the main assumptions of an organization, when you have something this big, are what need to be addressed. And the main assumptions is that which what led to this thinking stars explode was that there's a difference fundamentally between a planet and a star. And there really isn't. And the words we use have so much power. And I thought about this example earlier, and I want to tell maybe a little story, I guess, to emphasize how powerful words are. Imagine you're on an island, and the island is 30 miles by 30 miles. This is 900 square mile bit of land in the middle of the ocean. And you have a small village of people in the center. And you get stranded because your airplane crashes, and you're on the island with another person, and they can't communicate clearly with you. They have a problem speaking English. So you split up. You say, hey, listen, I'll build a fire. I'll try to signal for help. You find out what's in the center of this island, and we'll get to the bottom of this. So he goes out into the center of the island, and he runs back all excited. And he tells you, he says, hey, listen, there's a bunch of males in the middle of the island. There's a big village of males, and they all have heads on pikes. And you're like, heads on pikes? What the? That's not good. It's like, and he's like really excited, like, and you're like, that's not good at all. And he's like, because heads on pikes, it means they're a violent village. We don't want to go anywhere near that. So he's like, fuck, what do we do? And the guy that can't communicate clearly just tells you this, and then he runs back into the center of the village. You're like, wait, stop, what are you doing? And then he runs back into the center of the village, of the island, and you never see him again. So you're like, fuck, they killed him, But what it really is, I mean, and then you end up starving to death because nobody ever comes, nobody ever saves you. Because there's a big village of violent males with heads on pikes in the center of the island. But what he was actually telling you was that the village was a bunch of women, and they had pigs on sticks, meaning they were roasting pigs on sticks over open fires. They weren't a village of violent males that put their enemies' heads on pikes. They were a village of female islanders that were cooking. And that's the problem with language, is that if you define something in a certain way, if you call old stars planets, you're going to strand yourself on that island. You're going to starve to death intellectually because you have labeled something to be true in your head long before you had all the information available. See, you labeled the planet as being mutually exclusive of star before you have all the information. So now what's happening is that we're getting all this information, and astronomers, they're having an existential crisis because they realize, hey, we seriously effed this up. We had assumed that we knew what an old star looked like. Same thing with the guy in the village. He had assumed that the words he was using meant what he said they meant. He wasn't communicating clearly. And that's the problem with astronomers, is that they don't know how to communicate with one another. And it's starting to show. All right, you guys. Today is October something. I can't remember. All right, later.